Okay. All right. Hello to Facebook world. I think that it is streaming. I got both an error message and a it's streaming message at the same time. So we're just going to grab the little phone here and double check. But happy Wednesday to everybody out in Facebook land. And I hope I'm actually talking to people out in Facebook land right now. Um, it is 100 and it's going to be 107 degrees here or something like that today. So I am sitting inside in the lovely air conditioning. Yeah, I know. I don't feel like that should be an acceptable situation for literally anybody, but it's fine. Um, and yeah, Aubrey, what's it going to be for you? Yeah, we are. We're there.
We're actually supposed to get like a front moving through, so it's really sticky and humid here. Just
Yep.
standing in the house, I get like a coat of sweat on me. But it's supposed to be cooling down to the 70s, so we'll see.
That's like my favorite weather. I would ask Lisa, but Lisa literally lives like a 3 minute drive away from me, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very close.
So she's also going to suffer in 107-degree weather with me today, which is
Definitely.
delightful. My kids will spend the entire afternoon at the pool, and I will be lathering sunscreen on their pasty, sunburn-prone bodies. But here we are. All right. Well, happy GIE world. That is not what we were here to talk about, but since we're kind of a family run thing, I guess we're talking about weird family things. My name is, I should introduce myself. My name is Elizabeth Krause. I'm one of the parent coaches here at Growing Independent Eaters, and I am joined by two of our phenomenally amazing dietitians. I should have let them introduce themselves before launching into Heat Speak, but here we are. Lisa heads up everything. Lisa heads our research and publishing and so many things. Aubrey heads up our lactation. Both of them work with blended tube. They would do so many things and they're amazing. And I'm super lucky to interact with them and work with them every single day. Best job in the whole stinking world. We are here to answer one of the big questions that sort of plagues our families who are weaning kiddos who are 12 months and under, which is the question of, can I wean if my kiddo has a bottle aversion? In other words, not accepting, or if accepting, not doing anything with it. I think this is a big question because it's the one that either can encourage families or make them feel like they can't attempt to wean, or it might push families to think about weaning to a nutritional palette that might not be appropriate or the best for kiddos within that 12 months and under. And we're talking about adjusted age for those preemie ones. And so we want to talk about it. What do we do in that situation when my fully tube-fed kiddo is not accepting of the bottle? Does that mean we can't wean? Does it mean we wean to solids instead? Etc. So, Aubrey, I want to start with you with the question of what we experience from this demographic just on a day-to-day basis. And then Lisa, I want to go to you with the question of why solids isn't going to quite work for this demographic. But Aubrey, from your experience, you've weaned with us, you've weaned a kiddo with us, and you've been with GIE since the dawn of time, long time.
5 years now.
My gosh,
I know.
so long. That's kind of great. What have you seen from this age group? Is this like an impossible task? Once these kiddos lose that sucking reflex, as we all do, does the bottle become impossible? What have you seen?
Yeah, and I think what you just said about that reflex, that's one of the things that we hear a lot of families saying is, oh, well, our team told us we can't because they don't have that suck reflex. Um, you're right that babies are born with a suck reflex because that helps them acquire their nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
But it's false that we can't learn how to do that later. And so that's something that I think is really important, is that babies can learn and children can learn how to do that. Otherwise, you'd have tube-fed 15-year-olds who couldn't suck from a straw if they couldn't
Right.
learn how to do that skill. So
Yeah.
you can learn how to do that skill. But it is a learning process rather than something they will do instinctually or innately, which means we do see, we'll talk about them nippling, that they kind of like chew with the nipple because they're not quite sure what to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
But in most cases, it's very rare that we don't see kiddos, especially under the age of 1, who, when they actively start weaning, and that's really important, when they actively start weaning, who can't figure out how to use that bottle. Most kids are going to be able to figure that out. And it's going to be the most efficient way for them to get what they need. Doing the bottle, and it depends too, because we sometimes, I think, we do wean to drinking at under a year adjusted, but that doesn't always mean the bottle. So we do
Mhm.
have some kids that might wean to a straw cup or something like that. But in general, I think what parents get nervous about is this idea that they're averse to the bottle. And what they're averse to is what they associate with the bottle. And so part of what
Mm.
we're doing is trying to remove those unfriendly bad feelings about the bottle, so that they are friends with it again, not that the bottle is the impossibility.
Right. I think that there's a difference between being averse to eating when you're fully tube fed. Like, we sort of want your kids to not be eating a ton extra on full tube feeds. They'd probably vomit like crazy and feel really,
And I
really
wouldn't even call that averse. I think that
right.
that's
That's
an
like a
important distinction.
biologically appropriate response to
Right.
being full. We're all supposed to stop eating when we're full. I
Exactly.
don't always, but I should. So here we are. But I think there could be a difference between being averse to eating, as in, I'm full, I don't need to do this, I don't have to do this, and I don't really want to do it. And then there's averse to the bottle, as in, I don't like the way that this is being presented to me, the pressure that I feel, the anxiety that I feel. And I think we need to distinguish between those things. If your kiddo doesn't want to eat on full tube feeds, maybe the work comes with being okay that they don't want to eat when they're super full. If your kiddo is averse to the way that food is being offered to them, in other words, instant refusals, fussing, crying, back arching, etc., then it could be that the work to do is figuring out a different way to offer, with the belief and the hope that eating comes with weaning, not as a prerequisite to weaning.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but Lisa, can you talk a little bit? So I think that the hardest part with this age group is that the bottle has been offered, 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 offered. They aren't doing anything, nothing's happening. And so sometimes the professional advice given from local teams, or sort of the parental desire, is, let's just go to solids. Could we just wean to solids because my kid's happy to interact with that? Why for this age group, particularly sort of that 12 months and under, why is that not like I want to say a safe option, but maybe viable option is better? I don't know. How would you label that, and why does that not work?
Yeah, absolutely. There's several reasons why we can't do that. I mean, we can't, from a hydration standpoint, maintain hydration sufficiently just by eating purees and not having any source of liquid, so not drinking anything. We also know that purees are not going to be nutritionally dense enough, even if you enrich them with some calorie boosters and whatnot. Their ability to take enough variety of nutrients within the puree group is not going to be enough to meet all of their needs. So we do need to have drinking still be our primary vessel. We always say foods before 1 is just for fun. And really, it's just about learning, right? Like, that's what we're supposed to do with foods. Like, we start to introduce some taste, but we do that after the bottle because we don't want them to get full from the tube feed, or we want them to get full from their bottle first, or breast, and then have the exposure and the experience to start developing some skills, those preliminary eating skills for the solids. So then as the skills build, then our quantities start to slowly pick up and we start to increase the amount of food that they take, but it doesn't replace their formula or their breast milk in the bottle. So they need to be done in conjunction. So I always like to tell families that foods are complementary. They're complementary to the diet. They're complementary to that bottle. So if we do introduce them, at a developmentally appropriate time for a kiddo based on their age or corrected age, it still does not mean that it's meant to replace the bottle. Even if they have a lot of enjoyment from that, that's fantastic. We want to capitalize on that enjoyment, but it shouldn't be their primary focus is to, quote, get the kiddos to eat
Yeah.
those foods.
Yeah. So I actually love your phrasing on that is so much better than mine. Complimentary is that's like, yes, I don't know why I didn't think about that phrase particular, but I like that. So when we think about solids being complementary to bottles or to drinking that breast milk and formula, I think the vast majority do click with that bottle. And then there are a few who don't. And we think about other vessels that they could manage developmentally and based on their skill and whatnot. But sometimes this means that we do the dreaded, it is so dreaded, stop offering solids for a
Mhm.
time
Yeah.
while we are bringing drinking on board. And Aubrey, we talk about this like talking about the tracks that those lovely preschoolers and toddlers like to pick. Can you explain that? Why do we look at parents, their poor, wonderful, desperate, hardworking faces, and they're telling us, my kid will do solids. I'm so excited. And we say, so we want to pull that back. Can you talk a little bit about why we do that?
Yeah, and I do want to like for those listening, I do want to make a distinction. We're not saying that if your child is 7, we're going to make them wean to a
Right.
bottle.
No.
This is particularly for that the 1 and under
Yes.
kiddos. And the reason for that, as Lisa was kind of articulating, is that because I think a lot of parents then say, well, like, well, what's the difference? What's the difference between my 12-month, my 9-month-old weaning to solids? If that's fine in 3 months, the difference is that we have a lot of good research that it's called the first 1,000 days. That there's a lot of research that tells us that a lot of the child's overall nutrition status, their brain development, their long-term outlooks for health, a lot of that has to do with the first 1,000 days of nutrition. And that's basically preconception, pregnancy, and then the first year or two of life. And so I
Yeah.
say that because their nutrition needs are way higher
Right.
in that first year of life than they are at any other point in their lives. So
Yeah.
part of the difference is because we all know toddlers that survive on gummies and goldfish crackers, right? And the difference is they got all this really good nutrition leading up to that. So they have these stores that they can rely on. So the reason we're giving them, we're pushing for them to get that good formula, that good breast milk, whatever it is during that first year of life, is because we know that that nutritionally meets these super high needs that they have. And as they're getting older, they still have higher nutritional needs, but it's not as exponentially high as it is in that first year. So that's
Yeah.
why at 9 months, we can't let them wean to applesauce and carrots because nutritionally, it doesn't have enough calories. It doesn't have all the nutrients they need. It's just not adequate for how big the demands are during that developmental period of their life.
Okay.
And so, with that in mind, we need them to wean to formula or breast milk. We need them to wean to something that's basically nutritionally complete, has a lot of good overall nutrition. And they would need to eat such a variety to accomplish that, that we can't keep up with their demands.
Right.
So what happens is if you're offering solids and they're receiving the solids, if we continue to offer solids, kids have no incentive to drink. They're not going to want to go to the bottle. They're not going to want to go to the formula because they are going to hold out for the solids. And so it does 2 things. One, it creates this thing where parents are kind of like, okay, well, I'll offer the bottle first, but then I'll offer solids. And their child is just always going to hold out for the solids. And 2, it creates this anxiety in the parents that they know they're not supposed to be relying on the solids, but now they feel like, well, that's the only way they eat. So when we kind of take them off the table, it puts the child in the position that that is their only option. If they're hungry, this is what the option is because we know that that's what's best for them nutritionally, developmentally, etc. And there is no other option. So I think what happens is parents, if they feel like they have another option, it's really hard for them to stick with just offering and trusting the process to offer that formula or that breast milk and make sure that that's what the child is getting.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, that would be impossible. Um, so we pull back on solids. I think, Lisa, I'm curious, how do you talk with parents who sort of like all the hope just drains from their face because they've been trying the bottle or this for so many months, right? At this point, or so many weeks or so, and it hasn't clicked. And sort of solids felt hopeful, but this does not feel like hopeful. How do you talk with parents about that? How do you have that conversation in a way that maybe restores a smidge of that? I don't know. What do you say to people?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to look at it in context too. So when they've been offered the bottle, they've been on tube feedings, or it's been felt, it's like you mentioned before, it felt very pressured, or they felt very, kind of forced into doing it, and it was not what their body was telling them they wanted, and so they're pushing back. But parents often feel desperate, so they keep offering, and so then those no cues are not respected, and then they kind of lose trust with the whole process. So it's really about just resetting everything.
Mhm.
So it's resetting the expectation that we have to have some hunger in order to want to eat. So we
Yeah.
need to create that space, right? That's the first thing that we do is we create that space to start those feelings of hunger to come on board. And as
Hmm.
each step of the plan, we get more and more emerging hunger so that they can learn. The second thing is really that division of responsibility, which we go into in quite a bit of depth. In that, it isn't our job to get someone to eat or to make them eat. Our job is simply to present the opportunity and the offering. And when that goes awry, we immediately stop the offering, we end it, and we would go to tube feeding. So if your child, for example, was on a schedule where they got 6 bottles a day, and each bottle was followed up by a tube feeding, we would offer the bottle. If it's an immediate no, that's okay. They're learning if you remove the bottle at that point, they've now learned that mom and dad or caregiver, whoever, is now respecting my opinion, even though I can't, articulate it. I'm communicating it in my own way by turning my head, pushing my, hands out, whatever my motions are. They're respecting that. And so the more and more you respect their cues, the more trust they're building. So that when they do feel the hunger and that bottle is presented to them in a way that allows them some comfort to come to it if they want to, they naturally then start to explore it. And then with that exploration and that nibbling and that just kind of munching on it, as Aubrey alluded to, that will eventually lead to some transferring of milk. And then again, usually for infants, when it clicks, it kind of clicks. It like just
Yeah.
all kicks in. And
Yeah.
so as soon as they realize that I'm getting something from that, my tummy feels better. If I was overfed, a lot of our kiddos are overfed when they start a wean. If they were overfed and now they're stopping, they're not feeling that discomfort. All of those things are building trust. And so I think when you can kind of explain that to parents in a way that, really does show that there is a method to our madness, right? Like we do really believe in this.
Yeah.
And it does work, like it's very successful. And again, I always just emphasize too, like I know that salads, are important. Grandmas want the babies to eat, and everybody has an opinion about the salads, but it's really just a temporary pause, right? So
Yeah.
if you have a 7-month old and they would typically be taking some bites or taste. We just temporarily pull back on that. We get that wean done. We get the bottle feedings, really well established. We want to make sure that they're doing really well and growing with that bottle. And then we put them back in. So it's
Yeah.
not, we say we won't do it until they're 12 months. And if you're like, oh my gosh, my kid's starting the wean at 7 months, that means they're not going to let me give solids for 5 months.
No.
No, not at
No.
all. If the wean takes a month, then for that month they don't do it, and then maybe we wait 2, 3, 4 weeks afterwards. Again, making sure they're growing, really well established, doing what they need to do in the bottle, and then we put the solids back in, and we let them, continue to build on their intake and their skill in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a comma. It's a
Yeah,
pause it's not a period. It's not the
yeah,
exclamation. For some of you, it's a question mark, right? Like it's not the end of the sentence. It's a minor pause while something
yeah,
else shifts, and then we continue on.
I
I was,
also think, I
yeah,
was just going to say, I also think that for a lot of our families, it's a helpful reset because a lot of times the solids that are being offered are not solids that we're going to want to continue to offer.
yeah,
Because a lot of times they're foods that, again, are not going to support growth, are not going to support nutrition. The Cheetos and the cookies and the things that are like, it's really fun to see our kids eat, but they're
yeah,
not things that we can actually let them wean to in the first place. So
yeah,
by pulling back all solids, it's kind of like we're just going to reset. And when we start
yeah,
adding solids back in, we can talk about what solids we really want to add back in, not just the solids that we think are going to get our kids to eat.
right. Yes. I love that. I hadn't even thought of that. Good. Well, that's why you guys are the dietitians and not me. I do think for parents who are going into this solid pause and you can't find like hope, right? It hasn't worked. there's this part of you that's like, this is not going to work for my kid, right? It's that back end voice that's like, yeah, I've done that for months. If my kid was going to take a bottle, they would have already. I think it's important to remember that when we change what's happening, we can change the response of the kiddo. So when we're introducing appetite, which is a factor that probably hasn't been introduced until now, it's okay to hope for a different response. And if you can't get yourself to the hopeful place, which a lot of us can't, I can't. I'm very bad at that for myself, great at it for others, bad at it for myself. If I can't get to the hopeful place, try to get to ambivalence. Fine either way. I'm okay either way. I think that ambivalence I got this from Becky. I should give her some credit. But I think that ambivalence can be a lead into empathy because a lot of times when we've been offering this bottle and the kiddo just doesn't do it, it becomes frustrating because to us it feels like a behavioral refusal. And why won't you just do it? And if we can get ourselves into sort of ambivalence and empathy would say, I can see that you are a tiny person who has no idea what's going on, no clue why their body feels weird. You're trying to sort this out in the best way that you can, but you can't conceptualize it. Trying to get you to figure out a new skill. And that is hard for adults. So I wonder how hard it must be for you, oh tiny infant human person. And if we can look at our kids through empathy, where you are learning something big and tricky, and that must be really hard. I can be here with you for whatever that learning process looks like without being so emotionally invested in the outcome of this one bottle offer. So if you're the parent who can't get to hope, right, to the place where it's like, yes, I totally believe this will work for my kiddo. If you can't get there, that's okay. Just take the step towards ambivalence. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We'll try again. I can be ambivalent and I can think about my child. My child is slamming the door because I told her to get dressed for her dentist appointment. It's fine. But if you can't get to hope, get to empathy. You are a tiny human. You have no clue what's happening. You don't know why we keep bringing this to your face. And that must be really confusing and frustrating for you. How do I just be with you in this weird process without being emotionally invested in the outcome of this one offer? I can be emotionally invested in being with you during this offer. I liked that. When Becky was like, I really, really like the notion of getting to ambivalence, I thought that's really, really good. Okay, we have some questions coming in. Are you ready? So it looks like all these are questions about over 12 months. So should we shift gears just a little bit? I'll just start with the more generic one, which is, my son is G-tube fed. He just weaned off. I'm not sure how old this kiddo is. So Laura, if you want to give us a little hint. He had a bit of weight loss, but is gaining back. So that's great. He's been 1 month, no G-tube feeds, but he only drinks water, won't take milk or formula, etc. And it's been tough, but I don't know, Laura, I don't know how old your kiddo is, so that's a little bit challenging. But Aubrey is waving her hands.
That was my kiddo. So it just makes me
He's
laugh.
26 months, so he's over 2 years old.
So he was, okay, that's my child. My child weaned, but she was 21 months adjusted, and she refused to take any caloric beverage whatsoever. Just adamantly was like, nope, I'm not going to do that. And so, I think you can keep offering. But the reality is, at that age, assuming that kids are getting a nice variety of protein, fat, fruits, veggies, things, you don't have to do a caloric beverage. They're nice because they're really efficient and they can be a great source of some complete nutrition if you're using a toddler formula. But I can say confidently that all 4 of my children, tube fed or not, have never taken caloric beverages after about a year. They nursed a little longer than a year, but they weaned off tubes or weaned off of breastfeeding to solids and water for hydration. So if your kiddo's staying hydrated with their water intake and whatever solids they're taking, and they're doing a nice variety of solids, they don't typically need a caloric beverage. So I would take some of that stress off yourself. My kiddo weaned and grew and did all the things and only drank water.
And mom is a nurse and is offering like a great variety of foods. He loves strawberries, carbs, some proteins. So that, and he's already, I mean, he's a 2-year-old who's been 1 month tube feed and is 1 month tube free and is already regaining. That's actually a smidge. Lisa's like, yeah, that's
Yeah,
faster. Lisa, what are
that's
your thoughts
amazing.
there?
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people, like the majority of children, they do rely on caloric drinks for about 10 to 20% of their total calories. But that doesn't mean that they have to take them. So for our kids that are water drinkers, and we all have them in our client population that just they don't want anything caloric, they have an adverse reaction. And I get it. If you've been puking up milky formulas for your whole life, the last thing you want to drink is anything flummy and that has that same kind of texture. So you're like, water it is, and they're happy with that, they're fine. So then for the kids, again, most kids can grow just fine without the caloric drinks. For those that struggle because they're not getting that, 10 to 20% of calories in their drinks, that's when we just really focus on making every bite count of their food. So how can we enrich, and maybe parents are enriching some foods, but not all the foods, or maybe there's little tweaks that we can make. So that's when we kind of do a little bit deeper dive into the solids at that point. How can we make those a little bit more calorically dense so that we don't have to rely on or need any sort of caloric beverage? So as Aubrey said, caloric drinks are great. We obviously encourage them. It is a great way for kids to meet some nutrition and get some energy aside from just their food. But if it's a no-go, it's a no-go, and we don't push it.
Yeah.
We accept it. And then again, if growth is a bit of an issue, we work within the diet of the solids to make it happen so that they are able to get the extra energy that they need to grow.
Yeah. And mom is saying that he was really refluxy baby. So
Yeah.
I think Lisa, you just hit that on the head. If you've been puking it up forever, you're not going to want to put it back in.
Nope.
Yeah, I say welcome to tube-free life, mom. Woo! We're here and enjoy. She says they're on vacation. So go enjoy vacation, celebration, friend. It is time. Okay, we did get some more questions, so a little bit more closely related to our topic. Let's jump in a little bit. My daughter is 7 months. She drank from the bottle before, off and on. We've tried to cut back on volume from 120 ml to 90 ml to initiate some hunger, and she started taking 30 mLs from the bottle. But then she stalled from there. We're worried she's going to lose too much weight, so we started increasing her volume again, and now she's not drinking anymore. So I'm going to send this one to Lisa because Aubrey, I have the next one for you. Lisa, the concept of the plateau, I feel like
Yeah.
that's emerging for me in this thought, but 7 month old, it sounds a little bit like parents are sort of hoping that whatever they reduce, she should be able to make up by mouth. And then when she sort of stalls out, tell us, this is where I think GIE method is different than what you're going to find through a local team. Lisa, will you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so those caloric reductions that are made are intentional. They are intentionally meant to be a gap in calories and volume, both together. So if we've reduced, in that first step, the first stage, by 25 or 30%, we do not expect oral drinking to be 25 to 30%. We expect it to be emerging, starting to come on board. You see it kind of, kick in a little bit. The desire is there. Maybe there's small volumes, and that's okay. But then when it kind of stalls, rather than, it's tempting to get nervous. I understand that completely, especially when it's an infant and, everybody, every ounce you fought for, right? Like you fought for every ounce that your little one has gained. And so when the idea of we've stalled, we're not taking anymore, there could be some weight loss. It can sound scary. But really, rather than going up on feedings again to meet that caloric balance, that's when we would actually reduce again. So it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but we actually need to make another reduction, make those hunger cues come on a little stronger to keep that momentum going, and then the volume starts to come. Volume is not going to be like a tube feeding where it's an equal amount every bottle. It is going to vary substantially from feed to feed, and that is okay. And that's absolutely what we expect.
Mhm.
So yeah, so it's more about, these deficits are intentional. We don't expect oral eating in the first few stages to be anywhere near what the deficits are, but it's
Right.
kind of like those hunger cues. They start off kind of quiet, and with each reduction step, they get a little louder and a little louder and a little louder. And then the more you hear that, the more it's kind of ringing in the back of their minds. That's how they're starting to eat then and learn to take more volume to satisfy those needs.
Yeah. 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 So yeah, I think that's the place you hit it perfectly. I won't even reiterate because you said it great. So I don't need to. But yep, that's right. When you open that next door and you
Mhm.
watch them go through it, and you know that they are not going to drink the exact volume that you reduced, nor is that volume going to like be predictable from offer to offer to offer. And we start watching peas, poops, energies, all those different things to kind of know how things are going. Okay, my son is 4 months old and he has 100%, he's 100% NG fed. He gags on his pacifier and sometimes his hands when he puts them in his mouth, and he cries and spits up. How in the world do you get to bottle feedings when he has difficulty taking anything in his mouth? Aubrey, you are you're
It's
nodding
hard.
knowingly.
Yeah.
Here, tell us a little bit.
It's so there are a couple of things because I think, sometimes if kiddos have always really struggled with anything in their mouth, sometimes that's worth an oral assessment to see, like from a lactation perspective, I start to wonder, are there tongue restrictions? Is there a high palate? Is there something that might be making it tricky for them to coordinate that well? But the other thing is if they're constantly full, I mean, think about when you run around constantly full and like how your belly just feels so jiggly and like, oh, I could just, oh,
Mm-hmm.
if I go roughhouse or something, I'm probably gonna feel like I'm gonna throw up. So they're kind of always on that verge if they're really, really full.
Yeah,
So anything in their mouth can make them feel super gaggy in those situations. And kids who have some sort of feeding aversion or feeding trauma often have a hypersensitive gag reflex. They're more likely to kind of overreact to things
Mhm.
being in their mouth because they are so kind of anxious about it. I don't know if this is their first baby, but I can tell you all four of my children have gone through a phase where they jam their hands in their mouth until they make
Mhm.
themselves gag. It's
yeah,
kind of this experimental, like, oh shoot, look what happens when I put my fist all the way back in my mouth. So we've all
yeah.
done it, and we constantly like, don't do that. So it can also be some of that if they're gagging on their hands, that some of it is just they're experimenting. And if it's a kiddo that hasn't had a chance to have a lot of oral um, exercise, movement experience, then they're less aware of how their mouth is working and how things in their mouth are
Right.
working. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, gagging is actually like a really important part of learning how your mouth
super
works.
important.
That happens when you get food here, the nipple here, the finger there, all those kinds of things. Lisa, do you ever see the kind of gagging that leads to instant vomiting as a result of being like too too tube fed, like too high a volume?
Oh yeah, I mean certainly if you're overfed, if you've had too much volume pumped in, I mean there's nowhere for it to go. Like it's just that instant, like it has to come
Yeah.
up and out, right? Like so absolutely it can be a result of that. The only other comment I wanted to make about what Aubrey said was too, is that on the tongue of infants, the gag can be very far forward the younger they are. And
Mhm.
over time, as they get exposure and experience and they kind of work, that gag works itself to the back of the throat.
Yeah.
And so it could just be at 4 months, not a lot of oral exposure. That gag is going to be right more towards the tip of the tongue, which is why when anything goes in, it's that immediate gag. Again, not a bad thing. We just have to work through it. And the more exposure and practice they have, the further back that gag will become. And then, until it resolves. So again, I would just kind of keep that in the back of my mind as well for this mama.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something about weaning that actually brings so much resolution to some of these needs because we get to start tubing less. And so
Yeah.
their bodies get to feel better. And often I think sometimes the best part of weaning is that first reduction where parents are like, we've gone all day without a puke, right? And it's like
Mhm.
shocking. Um, it's just one of those kinds of things where it's like there's a lot about weaning that brings resolution to the things that make putting bottles in your mouth really, really hard. And once as those things resolve, then openness to the bottle becomes a natural byproduct because we can put things in our mouths and we don't puke like a crazy person. You know what I mean? So I think that that's actually there's a lot about weaning that can bring some resolution to a lot of what you're seeing. So how do we get to bottle offers? It might be that we get into a weaning scenario so that we can resolve some of those issues and open up some openness to that. So I think that's awesome. You guys are the best, best in the biz. There is another question about a 5-year-old and chewing and spitting out, and I'm going to answer. We have a great, great blog on that. We have some really good information. So I will come back to answer that in writing. But you two are amazing. I'm not seeing anything else come through at this point, and I'm excited. I'm excited to go stay in air conditioning. I was going to
Have
say go
fun.
do something fun, but actually I want to not leave my house. It's going to be hotter than the sun. I'm a Washington person for real because I can't handle heat. Right. Well, to all the GIE families watching, to all of you watching, if you are looking at this and going, huh, that's new information. I hadn't really thought about it that way. Or if you're someone who's sort of trying to navigate figuring out how to go through, how to start weaning, how to get into a weaning scenario, and then once you're in it, how do I know when to push forward? How do I know that it's enough? How do I know when to take a big, scary step? We are here to help you with that. We want to make a plan, and then we want to coach you through that plan day by day by day, helping you to understand what's safe, why it's safe, how it all works, and bring you from where you are to really where you want to be. So I would love to encourage you to reach out to us. We are doing a giveaway right now, too. I just remembered that we are doing a giveaway. We're giving away a bunch of things, including cookbooks written by the amazing Lisa, including merch. T-shirts are so great. I rock my parents' wean too one all over, and people look at me like, what in the world does that mean? And then I launch into a whole thing because I'm a nerd about it. We're giving away a pre-program console, and we're giving away an entire like wean package program. So if you haven't reached out to us before, this is the time to do it. If you have questions, you can email us at info at gieaters.com. You can also go to gieaters, GIEATERS.com and see we have a huge blog resource. We have tons of cookbooks. We have lactation consultants and blended tube feed consultants, and we have wean programs. And for the post-wean kids, we got program. It's like a program for Oprah. It's a program for you and a program for you and something for you and you and you and you. So if you aren't sure how to make it through this process, we are, and we want to help you with it. So reach out to us, send us your information, send us your intake. Our team will review it, get back to you, and we will get you started. So I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. And hey, we will be back next time there's a Q&A, which I don't know when that will be, but it's soon. So
24th, the 24th.
The 24th. Aubrey knows. She's in charge of them. So we will see you all then. And until then, go enjoy the sun or the rain as it were in Ohio. Have a wonderful day, everybody.